A man puts 2 bullets in a glass, and then fills it with whiskey. That's his breakfast every day. He's not satisfied with one mouthful. He picks up a revolver. He puts the bullets in his mouth into the gun. Then he aimed it at his chin, and pulled the trigger. It's a thrill. He played this game once a week. He didn't stop until he was dead. Then the man went to the supermarket to buy lunch. But as soon as he entered, he was robbed. The robber shouted, "Boss!" The customers fell down. Only this man. He was still picking his lunch. The robbers were furious. "What's going on? Are you deaf?" He pointed his gun at the man, and the man not only didn't get down, he grabbed the barrel of the gun and shoved it into his mouth. Come on. Shoot him like this. That's not exciting enough, is it? Oh, I know you like the feeling of blowing your brains out. Bandits are stupid. The man saw that he was hesitant to shoot. He grabbed the gun and knocked him down. Another robber came in late. The man takes him by the scruff of the neck and subdues him. He grabbed him by the neck and slammed his head on the shelf. After taking care of the 2 men, the man takes a bottle of wine. He pulls out the money the robbers took from him. He threw it all to the boss. He said he'd keep the change. The man's name is John and he's a retired Special Forces soldier. He still works out every day. He lifts dumbbells, sits up and fights against the wall. Other than that, he has nothing to do. He's got a little sister who lives with him. Life was going by uneventful, until the day he got a phone call. His sister had been beaten up while working in the slums. Looking at his sister in the hospital bed, John was heartbroken. His sister was a volunteer in the slums. Why would anyone want to hurt her? It was he who came to the scene of the accident where he found his sister, but no one here would give him any information, provide any information. He went back to the hospital with the flowers. A nurse was putting something into her drip, into his sister's drip. John thought it was a normal drug injection. He didn't think much of it. As soon as he sat down, his sister suddenly began to convulse. He immediately called the doctor to save her. Luckily, he was able to save her in time, and she was fine. After investigation, found that there is no Asian nurse in the hospital. John could not understand. Who is so cruel to kill and kill? What is the secret behind this? He decided to find out for himself. In a slum somewhere, there were always these people standing on the streets. They stop cars. They'd make a deal with them for a cheap price. They're all slum kids. Most of them had been taken into prostitution. John contacted a photographer friend of his. He got in touch with a photographer friend of his. He told him the truth. It turns out that child prostitutes go missing from the slums all the time. Everyone thought they were dead, but John's sister was convinced there was more to it than that. So he started investigating on his own. They filmed some of the locals smuggling. They were smuggling children and prostitutes standing in the street. He gave John the disc with the photos on it, and then he was ready to leave. The photographer looked around before getting into his car. Suddenly there was a bang, and the photographer's car exploded into flames. People on the street are running around in fear. Then John noticed a woman next to him. This is the Asian woman who was posing as a nurse. John rushes after her. The woman got into a black car and fled. Then came a car full of the woman's boys. They're firing guns indiscriminately. An innocent security guard was shot and fell to the ground. John quickly picked up the guard's pistol. The minions took heavy casualties and had to drive away. John then used the photos on the flash drive. To pinpoint a suspicious man and a bar. John went to the bar that night. He soon identified the man in the photos. When the man went to the washroom, John immediately followed him, but the bouncer stopped him from entering. John had to pretend to leave. He turned around and hit the bodyguard with a back kick. John rushed in and restrained the man, asked him if he knew the girl in the photo. The man insisted that he didn't, so John bought him some orange juice. After the drink, he also gave him a relaxing massage. The man could not resist. He could only tell the truth about the hideout of his accomplices. Then John took the suitcase and went to the other side of the stronghold. In the car, he opened the box. He found all the smuggled shipping orders inside. At the same time, Sergeant Dia was leading a raid on the slums to catch the gangsters. One of the officers found 2 suspects who weren't on the list. He shoots one down. Then he called for backup from Sergeant Diaz. But when Dia arrived, he shot the officer dead. Turns out he'd already been sold by a gang of traffickers. He became their protection. John came into the stronghold. He saw a car full of girls and then a bodyguard strangled John from behind. He took a round in his small bag. He knocked him out in one move. Then a dozen more bodyguards came. John used to be in the special forces. He was able to take on a few of them with ease. After taking care of a few people, John took the police who came to find the children in custody. But when they got to the warehouse, it was empty. Obviously, someone tipped them off that the traffickers had moved the children ahead of schedule. Due to the lack of evidence, Dia proposed to let John go back to rest first. He'll take care of the rest. As John was about to get into his car, he thought back to what Dia had just said, and he realized that something wasn't right. How did Dia know the name of the bag's owner? So he told the policewoman to keep his sister safe. Then he went back the way he came. He's the most ruthless gangster in the area. A kid lost his file. He took out a 50-knife. He flipped it over and stabbed his brother to death. Then he sent someone to the hospital to kill John's sister. The woman was about to do it when a gunshot rang out. Luckily, the policewoman arrived just in time. Meanwhile, John quietly followed Dia to appear. Just as he suspected, Dia was working with the traffickers. He called for help and warned them not to use the walkie-talkies because Dia is a black cop. It will take some time for the police to arrive, so John decided to go first. The noise John made alerted Baldhead. He immediately ordered his men to spread out and look for him. This turned the battle from a group fight into an alley fight. The dispersal of the crowd created a perfect opportunity for John. John knocked down one of his men. He grabbed his gun and shot him in the head. Then he rolled over and got 3 kills. Around the corner, he came across 2 lone soldiers. John jumped down and did a side kick. He shoots one of them at the same time. It's a clean sweep. Next up, Dia and his second-in-command. John uses the wooden frame on the cart to take Dia down, and then he goes to war with his deputy. John throws a punch to the right side of his face, and then a sweeping right to the bottom. The second man is quick to roll to his feet, and then, as the 2 fighters test the waters, John knocked him down with a whip kick. Suddenly, the bald man attacked from behind with a knife. Luckily, John is able to dodge it, and then Dia gets up with the chain, together with the deputy and the bald man. They attacked John at the same time. John is a special forces soldier, although he had to deal with 3 people at the same time. But he's still in the game. He started with a whip kick. In the midst of dodging and darting, he used his dagger to pierce the back of his second-in-command's foot. He punched Dia in the chest. The other man was unable to fight back. Then he took off his necklace and plunged it into his chest, killing 2 men in one fell swoop. The only one left is the bald head. John picked up 2 steel pipes on the ground and used them as weapons. The 2 sides set up a battle. Then the bald man started to attack. John used the steel pipes as a shield and reacted calmly. After defending a few moves, John switched the pipes to attack, instantly suppressed the bald head. Unexpectedly, the bald man used a dirty trick. He stabbed John and succeeded in his sneak attack. Deceitful bald head provocative said, "More powerful than your sister." These words completely enraged John. First, he hit the bald head with a steel pipe on the throat. Then he blocked the steel knife with one hand and hugged his knees. In the last round, the skinhead was bleeding all over his face. Unconvinced, the bald man still holding a knife to go forward. At this moment, Dia, who was still breathing, finally had a revelation of conscience. He slowly pulled out a key from his pocket and handed it to John. He said that in his locker, he had a list of all the people involved in the case. Finally, he begged John to leave him a pistol. As John walked out of the warehouse, there was a single gunshot. Dia ended his life of crime. Shortly after, the police arrived and wiped out all the bad guys. John also saved all the abducted girls. In fact, Dia's family lived in the slums, but he became an umbrella for the gangs. He's the one who lets the bad guys do what they want, to smuggle women of their own race, though his conscience turned at the last moment. But the process was shocking. Just like the anti-corruption in reality, all of them have been poor for 3 generations. One day, they become a high-ranking official, but forget the trials and tribulations and ideals they once suffered. They've lost their humanity.